Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine, Content Specialist for the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, which is part of the School of Politics, Security, and International Affairs at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Welcome to our Middle School Civics Highlight Series. Today we focus our attention on CG 3.8, in which we explain the structure, functions, and processes of the executive branch of government. In Part 1, we examine the processes of the executive branch of government, including executive order, vetoes, and appointments. Benchmark Clarification 1 examines the processes of the executive branch. Benchmark Clarification 2 compares and contrasts executive authority at the local, state, and national levels. We ask, what are executive orders? What is a veto? And what are executive appointments? We also then examine executive authority at the local, state, and national levels. So what are executive orders? Executive orders are written statements by the President outlining how an existing law will be enforced. So note that executive orders are representing the President using his power that is stated in the Constitution, even though executive orders as a specific power are not stated in the U.S. Constitution. So Article 2, Section 3 says, "He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed." And because he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, this means that the President might decide to interpret a law in a particular way in order to best present or represent how he believes he should take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So, looking at the name itself, note that if it's an executive order, this means that Congress plays no role in the writing of executive orders or the issuing of executive orders, because executive orders are based on laws that are already in place. Let's look at one example. Executive Order 13769. And the executive order was titled "Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States." And President Trump signed this executive order on January 27, 2017. So this suggests to us, since he took office on January 20th, 2017, that he made this issue a priority because he signed this executive order within a week of becoming president. Now we're going to focus our attention on Executive Order 11246. Executive Order 11246 was signed by President Lyndon Johnson on September 24, 1965. This particular executive order focuses on enforcing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So President Johnson signed that legislation. He signed that legislation on July 2nd, 1964, and then about 13 months later, he enhanced the implementation and the enforcement of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by focusing on the employment practices of the federal government. As the chief executive, the president oversees the federal government. He says it is the policy of the government of the U.S. to provide equal opportunity in federal employment. He's head of the executive branch. The executive branch is the branch that employed several thousand of people to enforce federal law. And here we're going to focus on prohibiting discrimination in employment because of race, creed, color, or national origin, and focus on a positive continuing program in each executive department and agency which the president oversees. So this particular executive order is different from the one that we just looked at from President Trump, because President Trump was writing an executive order focusing on a law that he did not pass. So Congress did not pass any laws in the first week of President Trump's presidency. In fact, the Congress is installed in January 3rd of 2017. So they really hadn't had time to go through the committee process and the bill process, etc. But yet President Trump was writing an executive order to a policy that he did not sign. Here, President Johnson is signing an executive order focusing on a bill that he did sign. So this tells us that presidents can sign executive orders whether they are tied to bills that they signed themselves or bills that they did not sign themselves. Now we're going to focus on different elements of executive power. First, we ask the question, what is a veto? A veto is a rejection of a bill, which is a proposed law, a bill presented by Congress. Article 1, Section 7 of the U.S. Constitution allows the President to take one of three actions when a bill is passed by both houses of Congress and is presented to the President. First, the President can sign the bill into law. We've seen that time and again where the President will sort of bring members of Congress as well as people who are particularly affected by the law that he is signing, and the President will sign the bill amid great fanfare that he has approved, showing Congress, I approve of this bill, thank you for signing it, etc. So it might be a very public ceremony. The President might veto the law. Well, to veto the law, Article 1, Section 7 requires that the President give the reasons in writing for vetoing that law. However, there's an exception, and that exception is number 3. What if the President takes no action? If more than 10 days is remaining in the legislative session, then the President can take no action, and then that bill becomes law without the President's signature. If there is 10 days or less that remain in the legislative session, then that means that the President can take no action, and the result is what we call a pocket veto, meaning that there is a veto, but the President, by doing nothing, vetoed that legislation, and a pocket veto cannot be overridden by Congress. So in some respects, it's kind of a way the framers of the Constitution kind of were telling Congress, don't act foolishly, don't act in a way to treat the President so badly that you're going to pass a law with less than 10 days left in the session, thus giving the President not enough time to read the legislation and to make an informed choice and an informed decision. Now let's look at the appointment power. Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution says the President shall nominate by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers, judges of the Supreme Court, and other officers. Now, the cabinet and department secretaries is not mentioned in the U.S. Constitution, but this phrase, other public ministers and councils, in essence covers that. So that means that the President can nominate people to hold public office even if those specific positions are not listed in Article 2. And this is solely the discretion of the U.S. Senate as to whether or not those individuals are confirmed. Now, if the vote in the Senate, which has an even number of senators, right now there are 100, but 2 senators per state means that Senate will always have an even number of senators no matter how many states there are. This means that there could be a tie, and if there is a tie in the confirmation process, that means that the Vice President can break that tie. Here's an example of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson being nominated by President Biden to be Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court on February 25th, 2022. So Justice Jackson she was a circuit judge, and that's a lifetime term, and President Biden nominated her to become an associate justice. That nomination was successful, which means that a majority of senators confirmed her to join the U.S. Supreme Court. And so, as a consequence, the U.S. Supreme Court now includes Associate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. What about executive authority at the local, state, and national levels? Well, in terms of qualifications, the president must be a natural-born citizen, at least 35 years of age, and 14 years a resident of the U.S. Now, this residency doesn't have to be in the previous 14 years to the person running for president, but they have to have lived in the United States at least 14 years. A president can serve 2 terms of office, but because of the 22nd Amendment, if somebody becomes president as a result of the president resigning or passing away, then a vice president becomes president, and if there's less than 2 years left in that person's term, then that person can run twice more. If that person wins the first time, then they can, of course, run a second time. If there's more than 2 years left in the now former or late president's term, then the vice president who became president can only serve 1 more term. For governor, the governor must be a U.S. citizen, must be at least 30 years of age, and must have been a resident of Florida for 7 years. That governor can serve 2 consecutive 4-year terms, but there's no lifetime limit. Notice the word consecutive. That means that the governor can only serve 8 years at a time, but if that person takes time off, they have to step away from the governorship, they can always come back into the governorship. So there's no lifetime limit on the number of overall terms that a governor can serve, but there is a limit as to the number of consecutive terms that a governor can serve in Florida. So now we're going to compare what the U.S. Constitution says and what the Florida Constitution says, comparing the powers of the president and the governor of Florida. So here the president is commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, while the governor is commander-in-chief of all military forces of the state not in active service of the United States. Both the president and the governor are responsible to ensure that the laws are faithfully executed, and the president and the governor also oversee the executive branch. So the executive branch of the nation belongs to the president, and the executive branch of the state belongs to the governor. Both the governor and the president also have appointment power, and the U.S. Senate confirms national level nominations, and the state Senate confirms state level nominations. So we do see a lot in common in terms of the powers between the president and the governor of Florida. Thank you for joining me for Middle School Civics Highlights. If you still have questions, we invite you to contact us using the information that appears on the screen. Till next time, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine. Thank you for joining me.